people, tudo bem com vocês? E sejam bem-vindos a mais um episódio de Lendo em Inglês com o livro The Star Shepherd. A gente tá lendo aqui um capítulo desse livro, que é um livro para crianças aí de 8 a 10 anos. A gente tá lendo juntos, então se você tá estudando inglês, tá aí no intermediário, esse livro pode ser uma boa pedida para você ir treinando, então a gente vai ler juntos, eu vou ajudar vocês aí com a leitura, né? Eu vou ler o capítulo e aí vocês podem ir acompanhando. Quem quiser pode comprar o livro, vou deixar o link para compra aqui embaixo, mas como esse é um livro em inglês, é um livro que quando a gente compra, né, aqui no Brasil é um livro importado, ele é um livro que fica mais caro de comprar, então, conforme eu for lendo, eu vou deixar a legenda aqui, para caso você não possa comprar o livro, que você me acompanhe, que você acompanhe a leitura pela legenda, né? E sempre deixo a dica aqui, né? Esses vídeos, o ideal é que você use ele para treinar a sua leitura. Então, primeiro você vai assistir o vídeo, olhando a legenda, mas me escutando, né, a falar, e depois você pode botar o vídeo no mudo e você lê a legenda, ou se você tiver como comprar o livro, você lê o capítulo em voz alta. Sempre tente ler você mesmo o capítulo em voz alta para você treinar. O objetivo é que você consiga usar esse material, né, esse vídeo, para te ajudar aí a ler melhor inglês, a aumentar o seu vocabulário. Quando eu estiver lendo, se tiver alguma palavra que você desconhece, pausa o vídeo, busca, né, num dicionário online aí qual que é o significado da palavra. Pode ser tanto um dicionário inglês como um dicionário português-inglês. O importante é que você busque saber o que as palavras novas que você entra em contato em inglês, que você busque saber o que essas palavras significam. Então, assim, usa esse vídeo como uma forma de estudar, de melhorar o seu inglês, já que você, né, caiu aqui nesse vídeo, provavelmente você tá aprendendo a falar inglês. Então, espero que apareçam palavras novas aqui para você buscar, para você aumentar o seu vocabulário. E depois que você assistir o vídeo todo, volte o vídeo para você deixar no mudo e ir lendo com as legendas, ou, né, igual eu falei, se você puder comprar o livro, beleza, termina de assistir o vídeo e lê você em voz alta. E aí, se você ficar com dúvida, né, da pronúncia de alguma palavra aqui na hora que você for ler, você volta o vídeo, busca aí a pronúncia no meio, tá? Então, vamos lá, vamos começar a leitura do capítulo 11. Vou começar aqui do título. Chapter 11. Carol spent the next couple of days in a terrible funk. Every minute he had between eating, sleeping, and watching the night sky, he worked on the catapult. He had to fix it, and fast, or he wouldn't be able to save any stars. 2 more had already been lost since the catapult broke. Last night, when a star had fallen, he'd raced from the tower, sprinting through the woods. Halfway to the star, a terrible wail shattered the peaceful night air. It had frozen Carol in its tracks for a moment, then spurred him to move faster. He was sure the sound was a vizsla, dark and treacherous as it stalked the woods. He had to reach the star first. Even if he couldn't fix the catapult in time, he hated the thought of another star dying at a vizsla's hands. When he found the crater, the star and its soft ebbing light awaited him, and his relief was palpable. He grabbed it and took off. The kinnie in the woods nipped at his heels all the way to his yard, along with the familiar snap of cold. Cairo's breath caught in his throat as he crossed the line of stardust and turned to face the vizsla as it emerged from the tree line. The huge, shadowed creature writhed and screeched as ice crept over the forest floor toward the yard, forming a silvery blanket that stopped right at the stardust. Cypher whined next to Cairo, gingerly shifting his feet because his paws were so cold. A surge of terror and undercurrent of pride coursed through Cairo's veins. He held the star in his hands aloft, and the visitors' screams pierced the night. The star's light seemed to grow and fill up the ardent forest, and Cairo threw up an arm to protect his eyes. Then the shadow creature let loose one last howl before the light consumed it. The star returned to normal, but the Vizsla was gone. The icy blanket beneath his feet receded, melting into the leaves. Cairo could hardly believe it had worked. That night, Cairo hadn't been able to send the star back into the sky, and it had fizzled out in his arms, but at least he had kept it out of the shadow's clutches, and the star had been able to do its job one last time before it was gone forever. There was some comfort, but not enough. It only fueled his determination to fix the catapult. The next day, as dusk began to fall, Cairo woke to a sharp rapping noise. Curious, he hurried to the front door, but found no one there. Only when he stepped outside did he notice the note taped on the door. Cairo pulled it down, and his eyes raced over the words. A meeting of the Star Shepherd Council will convene tomorrow at dusk at the Council's Tower in Duluth to discuss Cheering's abandonment of his sacred duty to the stars over the village of Dren. Cheering must appear before the council to explain his actions, or he will be labeled a traitor and banned from shepherding the stars. Cairo swallowed the word's bitter taste. His father was still missing. Not a single sign to let Cairo know he was alive. He had to believe his father was all right, but now even the council had gotten wind of his disappearance. Star shepherding was the only thing his father loved. It was why he had left Dren and his son behind, however foolishly. Cairo crumpled the note in his hand. He was mad at his father, but the council's declaration made him far angrier. He would have to go to Duluth in his father's place. Somehow he must convince the council to let Cheering remain a star shepherd. The memory of his father at his mother's bedside flashed through his mind. He had been wrecked by her passing, and the stars were the only thing that brought him any light. If he lost the stars too... With renewed determination, Cairo threw open the door to the workshop, marched across the field, and set to work. The lamp his father had crafted to light up as the sun disappeared hummed behind him and illuminated his way. Furious energy tingled through his limbs as he crawled inside the huge catapult. He'd fixed this machine, then head for the council meeting tomorrow and show them everything was under control. He could even tell them he had captured a Vizsla. His father hadn't abandoned his post. He was chasing a lead while leaving the stars in his son's capable hands. But Cairo needed to fix that catapult if he wanted to prove it. This time he finally found the problem. A gear, buried deep in the inner workings, had come loose and was stuck at an awkward angle. He quickly freed the stuck, broken gear and set a new one into place, then sat back in his heels to examine his work. If his father were here, would he be proud? Tightness spread across his chest, and he scrambled out of the machine. It didn't matter what his father might think. He wasn't here to see. He was off on some wild goose chase, and Cairo was alone. There was no one to help him now, not even the villagers. His father had seen to that. Carol took a deep breath, then closed the panel and dusted off his hands. Now to see if this worked. He grabbed hold of the lever and yanked it down. The gears moving in unison sounded like music to Carol's ears. When the red light blinked, he pressed the button and the catapult shot its imaginary cargo into the sky. Relief flooded Carol's bones. Cypher pawed his knee, and Cairo ran a hand through the dog's fur. "Let's go home, boy." When he entered the workshop, he saw the crumpled note from the council where he'd left it on the table, and the anger he'd felt earlier reared its head. How dare they question his father's devotion to the cause? It was his whole life. Cairo threw the note in the fire. It sparked once, then burst into ashes. He made his way up to the tower and settled into his father's chair. Cypher jumped up and licked his face, tail wagging. Carol laughed despite himself. "Down, boy." Cypher whined, then curled up on Carol's lap to snooze. Carol had only been watching the stars in the cycling chair for an hour when someone knocked at the front door again. Could the council members have changed their minds? Or did a new note await him downstairs? He set Cypher on the chair, the dog only lifting his head for a moment before turning to his dreams. When Carol opened the door, his heart soared. For a second time, Andra stood on his front steps. "Hi," she waved. "Need any help watching the stars tonight?" Her hopeful expression made Carol's heart bounce against his ribs. He held the door wide to let her in, then frowned. "But your father..." She placed a hand on Carol's arm. "My father is wrong and overprotective. Your father isn't even here. You shouldn't have to shoulder this responsibility alone, not when you have friends willing to help." His cheeks flushed, and he stammered, "Thank you." Andra grinned and stepped inside. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about watching the stars." Carol tilted his head toward the tower. "Do you want to turn first?" Her eyes widened. "Can I really?" "Sure, but you have to kick Cypher out of the chair." Andra laughed. "I don't mind sharing. Then you'll be his new best friend." The dog had no qualms about curling up next to Andra. She set the chair in motion, and soon Cypher was fast asleep. Andra's eyes filled with delight as the chair took her from telescope to telescope, showing her every section of the sky. "I'm always sleeping at night. I never really considered how lovely the evening sky is before," Andra admitted, "but this is like a whole new world." If you look closely, you can see some of the stars grouped together. They're called constellations. I like to think they're families of people who gave a piece of their hearts to the stars together in the sky to keep us all safe. Carol had never told this to anyone except his father. "Inseparable families, that's so nice," Andra said. A wave of sadness swept over Carol. "Except now they're not inseparable as they once were." He sank into a nearby chair, while Andra continued her watch. "You keep watch every night," she said, leaning forward, "and you rescue the stars. It isn't your fault someone is stealing them." He rubbed his palms on his knees. "I wish I was as good at clockmaking as my father. He never finished my training. When things break down here, I can't always fix them in time." The tightness from earlier crept back over his chest like a dark, vicious hand squeezing his breath. "But that hasn't happened recently, has it?" "The other night, just after your father took you home, the star we rescued." the catapult broke down and I couldn't save it. I couldn't figure out what was wrong in time. I held it in my hands as its light faded. The backs of Cairo's eyes burned, and he looked away from Andra. The chair stopped, and before Cairo knew it, she was at his side, flinging her arms around his neck. "It isn't your fault," she whispered in his ear. "Your father shouldn't have left you alone. I think you're doing a fine job without him. Mistakes happen, and there are many more stars that you have saved and will save. You're doing wonderful work, Star Boy." Cairo didn't dare blink for fear that his eyes would overflow. He wondered if Andra knew how much he needed to hear her words. She released him and squeezed his hands. "Let's take this next watch together." Andra led Cairo back to the clockwork chair. It was big enough to fit both of them snugly, even with Cypher snoozing across their legs. The chair began to move, and they settled in for their watch. Andra clung tightly to Cairo's hand, and he clung back. A glowing warmth filled him from his head to his toes, as though he were a star flying back to his own home in the sky. Ah, so cute! Tão fofa a amizade dos dois. Amizade colorida, né? Porque o Cairo tá apaixonadinho. A Andra, eu acho que gosta um pouco dele, mas assim, não tem nada claro ainda da parte dela. Ela só tá ali meio que pra ajudar e tudo mais. Mas muito bonita essa amizade. E espero que esse desenrolar aí do que aconteceu com o pai do Cairo aconteça logo, porque já tem muitos capítulos que a gente tá lendo que o pai dele tá desaparecido. As estrelas estão caindo, tá difícil de salvar, as vísceras estão chegando cada vez mais perto. A sorte é que o Cairo protegeu ali a torre, né, de vigia dele com o Stardust, ali, né, com a poeira de estrela. Então, quando a Vísla vai chegar perto, que é o monstro ali, né, que tá tentando pegar as estrelas para se alimentar delas, vai chegar perto por causa dessa Stardust que ele espalhou ali. As Víslas, né, os monstros não conseguem chegar perto, mas até quando esse garoto vai ter que se virar sozinho nessa torre? Ele vai ter que ir agora nessa reunião aí do conselho dos Star Shepherds para poder falar, né, que o pai dele não abandonou o posto, que o pai dele simplesmente saiu para poder ver o que estava acontecendo, né, tentar resolver ali a questão daquela queda de múltiplas estrelas ao mesmo tempo. Mas vamos ver no que vai dar. Espero aí que a gente comece a voltar a saber do paradeiro do Tyrion, que é o pai do Cairo logo. Então, pessoal, é isso aí, aqui que a gente tá na história, né? Espero que vocês estejam gostando, espero que vocês estejam conseguindo acompanhar. E agora, né, volta lá, muta o vídeo e leia as legendas em voz alta para você treinar a sua leitura, para você treinar também a sua pronúncia, né? Muito importante você treinar a sua pronúncia falando em voz alta. Se você conseguiu comprar o livro, então agora é a sua hora, né, de voltar ali no começo do capítulo 11 e ler em voz alta. Treine bastante, isso ajuda. Procure as palavras novas que você viu aí nesse capítulo, não deixe de procurar o significado das palavras que você desconhece, é só assim que você vai aumentar o seu vocabulário em inglês. E é isso aí, pessoal, muito obrigado por chegar até aqui. Se você gostou desse vídeo, clique em gostei, que isso me ajuda bastante. Manda esse vídeo nessa playlist aí de Lendo Inglês para outras pessoas que você conhece que estão estudando inglês. Me ajude aí a divulgar o canal. Se os vídeos do canal estão te ajudando, me ajude divulgando os vídeos do canal. E a gente vai se falar aí nos próximos vídeos, pessoal. Tchau!